Carolina Otero, Joaquin Subizarreta, and Marinés Icardi and Carlos Pelayo Martinez for assisting me in preparing this gallery for this event. And last but not least, I'm deeply thankful for all the participants in this illuminating conversation that will bring life back to life what Valentin defined as the hidden, ephemeral, and esoteric aspects of Houston culture. And without further ado, I leave you with Valentin Diaconov. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Quick, for this generous introduction. Let me make a short introduction of the series of my welcome all to Houston Hauntology, a symposium on the hidden, the ephemeral, and the esoteric of Houston's visual culture. First of all, I want to deeply thank Sol Jamili, the founder of Transart, for making this project possible. Without her enthusiasm for the topic, this would never happen. Second, I think an outline of the symposium is in order. Contrary to what you might expect from the title, the structure of this event is clear and in other ways materialistic. A place is haunted in the ghost sphere, but it has to be a physical location in the first place. That is why we will be talking quite a lot about architecture, especially. We are also going to meet artists of different generations who will either be presenting their own work or discussing other artists. Some of these visual art practitioners are interested in spirituality and what can be generally called the beyond, in quotes. Some have means to trace the particles of the past lives scientifically. We'll leave it tomorrow. Third, it must be noted that Houston lends itself easily to these kinds of inquiries. Spiritual franchising is especially widespread here. The city has all kinds of churches, and they play an important role in its wide disjointed fabric. According to a commercial data website, there are 3,396 churches, which means one church for every 700 or so people, if we count the metropolitan area. If we include parallel, it's really more people. In this oversaturated religious buyer's market, some people, mostly artists, still insist on following their own spiritual needs to invent and to mutate. Finally, a note on the title. Hauntology might not be a universally recognized academic discipline. However, it is an apt term for a kind of memory the city collects. Houston is very young, not in dire need of looking back, so history is a slippery business here. Cities, however, store memory, whether the population wants it or not, and cultural memory is the most precarious kind. Looking for ghosts through the notion of hauntology seems like a logical solution for a place that never stops expanding. It is very fitting, therefore, that we're starting with Eugene Laurie, architect of one of the strangest influences of American spirituality, the Rose Chapel. Our first speaker needs no introduction, and that is why his bio is the shortest I've ever seen. Stephen Fox is an architectural historian and a fellow of the Anchorage Foundation of Texas. He's a lecturer in architecture at Rice University and the University of Houston. Please welcome Stephen Fox.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and to participate in this event. Until Valentin Diaconov asked me to participate in this event, I associated the word haunt with ghostly apparitions, disembodied spirits of the dead who refuse to go away. Yet on examining the etymology of the word haunt, I find that it primarily means a habitual practice or a compulsion to return. Recurring action, motivated by habit or custom, skews toward compulsive, obsessive inclinations with which I am more familiar. In considering the ideology of Houston, What seems strange about pairing this city with the word haunt is that Houston is usually thought of as repelling the kinds of emotional attachments that might call forth a haunting response. Because I am a historian of buildings and sites, I do experience places as resonating with the presence of people or events previously associated with those places, as well as the people and events associated with them today. So while for me, Houston is full of intimations of departed presences, I know that this is not how most people tend to think about the city. When Dr. Diaconov approached me about this event, I was in the process of writing a tribute to the architect Eugene Aubry, who died in December at the age of 88. Gene Aubry was a vivid presence in Houston architecture from the 1960s until he left Texas in 1986. First, as the partner of his one-time teacher and mentor, Howard Barnstone, then as director of design for S.I. Morris Associates, subsequently Morris Aubry Architects. Gene Aubry produced a series of local architectural landmarks that, disquietingly, have begun to disappear, even though they are not that old, and they're big. As a historian of architecture, I am troubled that Houston consumes structures of steel and concrete that have the potential to last for centuries, simply because the current owner's pro forma deems them irrelevant and expendable. The power of ideology and abstraction over material construction is terrifying when it results in the depletion of both embodied energy resources and the collective emotional attachments that these buildings anchor. Barnstone and Aubry's Center for the Retarded on Allen Parkway in 1966 was demolished in 2019. Their Rice Museum of 1969 and its companion, the Rice Media Center of 1970, were demolished in 2014 and 2021, respectively. Aubry's tin houses in the West End of 1974, the nickname that his client, art dealer Frederica Hunter, who was also Aubry's sister-in-law, gave the pair of houses. They were faced with corrugated sheet iron, the better not to stand out amid the metal-faced warehouses of the West End, on the right is one of AC's Conrad's buildings, were demolished in 2011. Although Aubry's design of the Jesse H. Jones Central Library still stands, its sensational modern interiors by his design partner Sally Walsh were swept away in 2008, when even placed Oldenburg's geometric mouse scale 10, the first modern public art installation in Houston, which Frederica Hunter told me Aubry and S.I. Morris raised the funds to acquire, got unceremoniously moved to the library's back. Aubry's architecture in the 1970s displayed affinities with the work Frederica Hunter and her partner Ian Glennie exhibited at the Texas Gallery, such as works in series. Both the library and Aubry's Stephen P. Farish Hall at the University of Houston of 1971 on the left, slated for imminent demolition, were extrapolated from the octagonal ground plan of Barnstone and Aubry's Rothko Chapel. Aubry explored the possibility of pop architecture with his design of the Glassell School of Art for the Museum of Fine Arts of 1978, demolished in 2015, with its punning material reference to the donor's name. Aubry's design of the Brown and Root Southwest Houston office building of 1980 was minimalist in its detailing, shaped in its planned configuration, and pop in Aubry's nickname for that planned shape, the bow tie building. Aubry deployed wit to enliven the civic and corporate commissions that S.I. Morris was so successful in procuring. The 500,000 square foot Brown and Root building was demolished in 2021. Aubry was the quintessential architect of Houston's exuberant golden buckle of the Sun Belt period of the 1970s and early 1980s. The destruction of Rice's Media Center and Aubrey's other buildings robs Houston of cultural production generated from and in response to distinctive local conditions. Demolition, instead of imaginative reuse, flattens our collective experience of Houston, depriving the landscape of the potential to forge emotional connections with us through shaping spaces and formulating memories. In 2012, Texas A&M University Press published Aubrey's book, Born on the Island. Aubrey asked me to write text accompanying his drawings and an introduction. This led me to address the phenomenon that Valentin's topic of hauntology also raises, nostalgia. Rather than dismiss nostalgia as trivial sentimentality, I want to explore it as a neurological response to alienation and familiarity, the haunting sensation of experiencing estrangement in familiar settings. Houston thrives on the antics of alienation. The San Jacinto Monument of 1939 is a prime example. With its solemn symmetry, heroic iconography, and monumental scale, the San Jacinto Monument aimed to stand out as an exemplar of cultural significance. Until you grasp its insignificance in the landscape of global carbon production that dominates the Houston ship show. You have to really search this to find it out. Houston preserves fragments of the old new architectural juxtapositions that serve to connect present and past in most cities, rather than severing the present from what came before. Conventional haunting, that is, confirmation of the anticipation of continuity, is supported by the 19th century churches of downtown Houston, for example, which connect institutions and generations to serve as repositories of collective memory. Houston possesses traditional elites, here a bevy of grand dames, that in other U.S. cities, indeed other Texan cities, would constitute, by default, the cultural leadership class. There are Houstonians, such as George R. Farish Jr., seen here with U.S. District Judge Hilda Tagle atop the Niels Esperson building downtown, who go back to the beginning, genetically speaking. George Farish is the great-great-great-great-nephew of Charlotte M. Baldwin and A.C. Allen, the founders of Houston. Early 20th century adherents to the nationwide progressive movement sought to ensure that Houston would be properly haunted by aligning its growth with national models of good design, represented by the 1910 Campus Master Plan of what is now Rice University. Rice University's campus sounded all the right notes of progressive spatial propriety. In its clarity, hierarchy, and monumentality, it provided a template for the development of other progressive-era public spaces in Houston, such as Herman Park and Main Boulevard, where the monumental scale of progressive-era spatial coordination sought to order Houston's growth and link it to legible symbols of civic identity and historical authority. During the 1920s, the art collector and philanthropist Ina Hall mobilized architecture, landscape architecture, and decorative art to frame themes of cultural identity and standards of cultural connoisseurship that could serve as a model for refining local taste. Modernization in the form of business entrepreneurship consistently challenged the prerogatives of progressive-era civic idealism. Unacknowledged by proponents of both cultural identity and entrepreneurial speculation, was the condition of racial segregation and oppression that affected the 20% of Houston's population who were African American. The architecture of racial segregation and inequality which pervaded social and economic relations in Houston, was unacknowledged by both proponents of the myth of cultural consolation and of the myth of striking it rich. Houston won the Second World War economically because the U.S. government constructed a petrochemical production infrastructure along the Houston Ship Channel that would fuel a post-war expansion built on the extraction and refining of carbon resources. Modernism replaced traditionalism as Houston's post-war cultural standard. An early indication was the installation of a sculptural figure by the Parisian artist Marcel Morin as a grave monument in Houston in 1927. Under the dispensation of modernism, even haunting could be brought up to date. The Parisian immigrants Dominique and Jean Demenil emerged as Houston's foremost modernist proponents, asserting their cultural authority by commissioning the New York architect Philip Johnson to design their modern house, completed in 1951, which they furnished with a mixture of new and historical pieces, confounding Houston modernists who presumed that to be modern was to be against history. Dominique and Jean Demenil architecturally aligned with the austerity and rigor of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, architect for the Cullinan Hall addition to the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, completed in 1958, with its awesome, transparent, 30-foot-tall gallery space, where modernity can be performed with haunting resonance, about which Marcia Brennan has written in her book, Curating Consciousness, Mysticism and the Modern Museum. The construction in 1971-73 of the second phase of Mies van der Rohe's master plan, the Brown Pavilion, contained the Upper Brown Gallery, which was no less awesome in its horizontal expansiveness. The radical transparency and lateral thrust of the Upper Brown Gallery made modern metaphysical space viscerally accessible. Mies's mastery of modernist architectural space was refracted in the U.S. government's construction of what is now the Johnson Space Center, opened in 1964 in Clear Lake, where human flight into outer space was coordinated from the Apollo Mission Control Center. Space of unprecedented magnitude was key to the immense volume of spanned and air-conditioned at the Astrodome of 1965, and at the roofed and air-conditioned shopping center, the Galleria, which developer Gerald D. Hines opened in 1971. Space of a more introspective nature, which questioned rather than uncritically celebrated, was contained in the Rothwood Chapel, enveloped by the monumental canvases of Mark Rothko. Exploring the space of shadow also motivated the architect John Simonic when he designed his house of 1968. Quiet, the contemplation of mortality, and openness to the out-of-doors characterized Clovis and Marianne Heimsath's Kagan Moody Chapel at Emmanuel Memorial Park of 1983, and also at the architect Daniel Solomon's Herman and Elaine Prower Family Chapel of 1997 at Beth Israel Cemetery. In late 20th century Houston, sites where hauntings might even be desired were unplugged from carbon-generated conditioning to accept Houston's sun, heat, humidity, rain, cold, and insects. Interiority and dense compacted layering are perceptible at the back building of the Museum of Fine Arts of 2000, where vistas are internally focused and illumination stems from the light within, a shallow space installation by James Torello. Barnstone and Aubrey's Rice Museum and Media Center diverged from the mid-century trajectory of modern monumentality to embrace the countercultural and the vernacular, as did the Beer Can House, located in the West End near the Tin Houses, an installation constructed by the house's owner, John Milkovich, a retired upholsterer, and the Orange Show, completed in 1979 by visionary artist Jeff McKissick, a retired postal worker. Hiram Butler deliberately chose the West End, the ethnically, racially, and economically mixed working-class neighborhood, home to a mixture of land uses, as the site for his shed-like contemporary art gallery, opened in 1989. The countercultural movement of the late 1960s and early 1970s radically expanded the range of sites, works, and actors encompassed by the term art. Rick Lowe, Deborah Grotefeld, and Michael Toronto collaborated with other Houston artists to start Project Row Houses in 1993 and explore ways to make connections between the world of art and the historically African-American Third Ward neighborhood, threatened by contrary cycles of disinvestment and gentrification. In 21st century Houston, racial others are no longer repressed and alienated, but speak out in ways that seek to not forget complex and fragile histories of injustice and oppression. Bethel Church Park in 4th Ward of 2013 is a haunting and accessible room to which one can return. Surbi Angelini, working with architect Sean Shea, purposefully shaped this space as a place for the convergence between art and anthropology, where hauntings are sought out and welcomed. Kirby Liu and his father Frank Liu broke with sterile development formulas to revive the United States Post Office of 1962. Rather than demolish the immense complex, the Lius undertook a radical restoration, reprogramming the building and creating new sites of 21st century urban sociability that mobilized estrangement in search of David Addix's Mount Rushhour statuary installation. The house in the air dialectically embraces, rather than resists, being haunted by Houston estrangement. In searching out the hidden, the ephemeral, and the esoteric in the cultures of Houston, I conclude with a pair of existing houses by Eugene Aubrey and Howard Barnstone, which in their transparency, spatial expansiveness, and simplicity seem to endorse the tropes of modern architecture. But in both, transparency and spatial liberation play on subjective sensations of the infinite and the intimate, sensations that are not easily reconciled discursively, and therefore are all the more insistent in their emotional intensity. Architecture, like other forms of art, has the power to dissolve discursive categories and affect human emotion and perception to produce insight and delight. In seeking to discern a spiritual dimension in Houston architecture, this is what I compulsively return to.